Thank you again, Mr. Morris, and excuse me. And thank you to Dr. Sabat. Let's give both of our speakers another round of applause. And now it's time to hear from you, our audience members. If you don't have a note card already, I would invite you to get one from either Kauthar or Lena. Can you girls raise your hands? Anybody, if you want a note card, put your hand up and Kauthar or Lena will get one to you. What we'd like to do is, our plan is to collect the note cards and read about 3 of them at a time and allow our panelists to sort of speak to either them separately or try to weave them together into a narrative of some kind. And then we'll do that for the next few minutes. So please, if you have a note card with a question, put your hand up. If you would like a note card, put your other hand up. Put your hand up that doesn't have the note card, and we'll know to give you one. And if we'll get a couple, yep. Kauthar, could you bring a couple completed cards up and we can get started? We'll read some cards. Thank you.
We have about 15 minutes.
We've got about 15 minutes remaining, so we're going to read a few questions and then we will try to save the last 5 minutes for a closing statement for each, a brief closing statement for each speaker. Thank you. All right, I'll read these first 3. The first one is a 2-parter. Is it true that the ballot initiative allows for 4 misdemeanor offenses in regards to sale to minors? And how does this protect our youth? And is this just a cost of doing business? And the second part is, can we validate the Colorado youth data presented and collected from urban districts? The second question is, what does true decriminalization look like? How does it differ from legalization? And the third one is, how would police enforce and measure the 2.5 ounce limit? Any of our panelists want to take any of those on?
All right, so the first question was, is it true that it takes several civil infractions to become a misdemeanor for the possession of marijuana, right?
No,
Kids.
sale to
Kids,
children.
sales to kids.
Sale to kids.
Oh, okay. So is it, no, absolutely not. The unlawful sale of marijuana outside of the regulated system is a crime. And the civil infractions are the possession of marijuana. So that is not true. The sale to children is completely, it's just like driving under the influence. That is something that is a misdemeanor. That does not be reduced to a civil infraction. So there's certain offenses that will remain criminal offenses as they should.
The other question about decrim versus legalization. So, it's a great question because these two concepts often get conflated. And in polling, when we've done polling, and you ask somebody, are you in favor of legalization or not? Maybe it's like 60-40, let's say, are in favor. And then you follow it up by defining decriminalization. And then you ask again and say, okay, knowing what decriminalization is, do you agree with legalization, decrim, or prohibition? And the support for legalization usually goes from 60 to about 30% because at least half of those people were actually in favor of decriminalization, which I think is often the case to pollsters and also when people are voting on just a yes or no. There's a critical difference. Decriminalization does not legalize the commercial sales or the market, the supply side, in other words. It only legalizes the demand side. So it legalizes the, basically low-level possession, or there's many shades of it, of course. It can remove criminal penalties, it can remove civil, it can have tickets only, it might have, there's a lot of shades of decriminalization. The critical difference is that it doesn't legalize the commercial sales of it. It just basically allows the low-level possession. The Colorado remark, I think to go back and forth on Colorado data is a futile exercise. There's so many different studies out there. I've actually seen a lot of studies showing increases, especially when you look at no increase on 12 and 13, but then increase on 15, 16, 17, and most definitely an increase with 18 to 25-year-olds. So, there isn't the urban, suburban, and rural delineation. We do not have that kind of data, which is a shame. So I think one of the things the proponents in 2012 said, not Barton, but others have said is, if we legalize it, we can, have more data and we'll get more information on it and we can really test this. I have not seen that at all. In fact, I feel like the data has often been suppressed by the government who doesn't, they don't want to look bad. We've done FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act, which is very difficult to get that. I work for politicians on both sides of the aisle. I've never met a politician who would stand up and have a press conference, talk about how bad something is under their watch. So it's very hard to get a critical eye when this happens, and I think a lot of it's industry supported, and that's why.
Okay, this is a two-parter. It's written so there's one question for the opposition side and one question for the in favor side, and so we'll read them both and you can both address them. To the side that is opposed, the question is, does Michigan's proposed amendment preclude future regulation and legislation on marijuana if future problems are identified? Even if what's on the ballot isn't perfect, should we let it be the enemy of good? And while you think about that, to the in favor side, the question is, can you state at least one thing about the current proposal, something that's not in it or something that should be in it, that you don't like?
I can state something. I helped write this proposal. I was one of the people that put a lot of input into its drafting. And one of the things that I don't like, it doesn't automatically allow for the expungement of marijuana-related offenses. That being said, there will be more opportunities for that to happen. This is a movement that is happening all over the country. There's legislation that is pending right now that says if this bill passes, then the expungement statutes that we have now will be amended to allow those that have had marijuana-related offenses, nonviolent misdemeanor marijuana-related offenses, to be taken off their record. And this is, just because this passes doesn't mean that's going to pass, but I certainly hope it does, because let me tell you, I do a lot of criminal defense, and there's a lot of people that have just possession of marijuana cases on their record. And those are individuals that were placed on probation, and many of those people couldn't get through probation, and so the alternative was going to jail. Even if it was small amounts of jail, 7, 10, 15 days, or it could have been 30, 60, or 90 days. The point is, one day is too much. That conviction has precluded people from getting jobs and has precluded them from getting student loans. It keeps them from participating in our society. And for what? For being in possession of a drug that's not hurting anybody.
So, well, I would argue the thing not hurting anybody, but that wasn't the question. And these are great questions, by the way. The one about being the enemy of the good and why would, can we sort of fix it? I think if it was maybe written a little bit differently, maybe that would be the case. But what I've seen in every single state is when you open the door to a legal market, which means the special interests, the lobbyists, with all due respect, the very smart attorneys who are very knowledgeable about it, etc., then I think it's very, very difficult to close that door on commercialization. I think the bright line is the commercial sales, yes or no. And so this goes over that line by allowing that to happen. And I don't know how it's written in Michigan. I'm not sure how the law works in terms of what the legislature can do to an initiative, if they can really alter it or not. Most states, it's very hard to alter the wording of the initiative after it's been passed. But I worry about that open door and basically, the fox is guarding the hen house, because in every other state, and maybe Michigan will be the a random exception, which would be great, but in every other state, the influence of the industry serving on those regulatory bodies, influencing the politicians who submit comments to those bodies, funding them and lobbying, etc., has grown enormously. And so for me, it's not so much about why do we let perfect be the enemy of the good. I think it just goes over that bright line too much to be able to fix it and allows way too much leeway to the industry. I wish we had started a lot more modestly. This is a major change that happens once a century. I wish it was done in a way that was more on the decrim, because I agree with everything that Martin said at the end about the expungement, etc. And so I wish we had started with that. And by the way, also had a awareness campaign about today's harms of marijuana. I mean, I think that we sort of gloss over that as there's no, and that's not the scientific consensus, but it doesn't do that, and it really, for me, goes over that bright line.
Just to answer the question regarding the ability to change the law,
Legislature.
the answer is yes, the legislature can change it with a 3/4 majority, which we call a supermajority, as opposed to a simple majority. We have done that with the Medical Marijuana Act when the legislature found it necessary to include extracted products within the definition of usable marijuana. And so has been something that they've done before, and they do have the ability to amend it in the future.
They made it more open with medical marijuana. They allowed extracts. That was what they did with the.
Yes. They're more liberal.
One question, brief question. How do the hazards of smoking cigarettes compare to the physical hazards of smoking marijuana? I'll take a stab at that. I think it's really a matter of dose. I mean, clearly there are carcinogenic substances that would be potentially present in smoked marijuana, but people don't typically have a 2 or 3 pack a day or even a 1 pack a day habit. So the degree of exposure is probably significantly greater for cigarettes. Also, a lot of the marijuana that ends up being used in states that have gone legal is actually in the form of edibles rather than the smoked product.
Can I say one thing on that?
Sure, please do.
I think that's all, of course, correct. This is so important, but there is a critical difference between smoking tobacco and using THC in one form, in this case, for argument, let's say inhaling it somehow. And that critical difference is that although smoking and the carcinogens of cigarettes are directly related to lung cancer, that's why we have so many people dying. By the way, nobody dies of an overdose of tobacco either, so I'm not really as concerned about dying of overdose either. I'm concerned about the indirect deaths that absolutely occur with marijuana when it comes to 2 things where tobacco doesn't ever touch it. Things like mental illness, suicide, and driving. You can smoke a cigarette and get in that simulator. You might do better, and I hope there's nobody in here. I don't want to tell you to go smoke a cigarette because it increases your concentration. But the issue is you don't get high from it in that way. That's a critical difference. You know, they built the Brooklyn Bridge, everybody was smoking when they built it. They built a very good bridge. I mean, if they were using THC, the issue is it intoxicates you. It changes your state of mind. That is a critical difference between tobacco and THC that I think is often lost, and it's really critical, and that's what worries me about THC. It's not only, we didn't even talk about secondhand marijuana smoke and all of that, which is a huge issue. If you live in a condo building, good luck. If you're in a public park next to a patio, somebody's private patio, good luck. Those environmental issues are huge, we haven't talked about, but I really worry about the fact that we're talking about one substance that intoxicates, makes you high, and changes your state of mind, and another substance that is very addictive, more addictive than heroin and tobacco, but does not change your state of mind in the way that marijuana does.
So first of all, I agree. Marijuana is, and what we're talking about now, a recreational drug, and much like alcohol. But people forget about the degree to which that cannabis comes in so many different forms these days, and that is going to increase. That's why I talked about with dispensaries and retail establishments that have regulated cannabis, they are going to be they're going to have a significant opportunity to purchase a lot of different products, most of which are not used through smoking, and therefore don't provide that unhealthy issue with respect to smoking. Then there's also the vaporization of the cannabis that can occur as well, that heats it up to a vapor instead of a smoke, which is also much less harmful. But again, these are recreational. We're talking about recreational cannabis here. And of course, there's going to be some negative side effects to it. That's why it's important that it's regulated instead of letting the black market control what is the second largest recreational drug that this country uses.
Thank you. Question for Dr. Sabat. I guess it's a 2-parter. Part 1, do you think alcohol should be legal? And then part 2, you commented that it's inappropriate perhaps for marijuana growers to be a part of the regulation of the marijuana industry, but a lot of regulatory bodies are comprised of professionals in those industries or professions. pharmacists make up the Board of Pharmacy, so on and so forth. And these boards are often deferred to by the court system. So how is marijuana different?
So on the second, I'll go to the second one first. The pharmacists on a board of pharmacy to offer expertise on those issues is very different than Anheuser-Busch serving on the bodies that regulate what goes on an alcohol bottle, than Philip Morris regulating what the FDA says about warning labels, than the marijuana industry would say about advertising and the kinds of products that are out there. So I think there's a qualitative difference there, and I think it's something really wrong with our democracy right now, the money in politics and these special interest groups, and I'm seeing it all over the country in every single state capital. It is so ironic that the marijuana movement that began in the 60s was a counterculture movement, and now it's basically been taken over by corporate interests. That is one of the ironies of our century we're going to be writing about, a long time from now. Historians are going to look at it. A point that is related to this that was made, and that is just we will obviously agree to disagree, is the point on there's multiple products, and you're saying that's a good thing. I think that's a bad thing. Pablo Escobar is really bad, but didn't come up with the pot gummy bear. Legalization did, commercialization did. The edible, the 99% shatter that's now out there that you do vaporize, that you do heat up on the end of a hot needle. Those things are innovations of a commercial industry. They're not innovations of drug dealers. As bad as drug dealers are, they don't have that kind of advertising, industrialization capability. And so that very much worries me. The first question was about alcohol. Do I want to make it legal? It's a great question. I always get it. Alcohol is not legal because it's good for you. Let's just back up a little bit. Let's turn down the dial here. Alcohol isn't legal because we're saying if only more people drank, we'd be a better off society. Cops aren't saying if only more people drank, our communities would be safer. No parent says if only my kids or my husband or wife drank, we would be safer. Nobody. Alcohol is legal because it has been used by 70% of the West since before ancient Greece. We're stuck with it. We pay a huge cost. For every dollar in tax revenue, it costs us 15 in social costs. It kills more people than all illegal drugs combined, and we have more arrests for alcohol, as you would know, than all illegal drugs combined. And repeat that. More arrests for legal alcohol, DUI, selling to kids, using in public, than all illegal drugs combined. We're not gaining, but we've made that deal. You can blame the ancient Greeks or the Egyptians for that. We can't go back in time. You cannot prohibit something 70% of people do. Barton admitted 10%, I would agree, that's what the stats say, use marijuana on a monthly basis. Maybe it's a little bit higher than that. Let's say that's an undercount. To me, that is not justification to say everyone's using it, it's here to stay. And now, I'm not saying we're going to have 0% either, by the way. I'm not saying we're going to have a drug-free society. No one's ever going to use illegal drugs. Of course they will, and they do now. But if you look at the use rates between our legal and illegal drugs, it tells you right there that availability, access, and commercialization, of course, drive use. Doesn't mean some people won't use illegals. They do, and they will, and they always will. But that's a big difference. Alcohol, we're stuck with it, kind of to our detriment, but we've made that deal. And even with tobacco, we know how it kills. We know how bad it is. We still have 500,000 people. We still have 25% of Americans using tobacco, knowing that it shaves years off your life. That's universally accepted. The tobacco industry finally, a couple years ago, admitted that. It took them 120 years, but they finally admitted it. And I don't know why we would want to do it again with, I don't care if it's marijuana or another kind of intoxicating drug, why we want to commercialize it, which is what the proposal does.